A dedicated soldier named Andre Coleman is about to experience an event that will change his life and the lives of others around him. What starts as a routine military award ceremony takes an unexpected turn when Andre is overlooked for a medal that many believe he deserves. His quiet acceptance of this oversight sets off a chain of events that leads to a dramatic and unexpected recognition by the highest authorities. But what was it about this seemingly ordinary ceremony that prompted such a significant response? Stick around to find out. But before we get started, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're moved by this story of courage and justice, don't forget to subscribe. The scorching sun beat down on the dusty streets of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, as Sergeant Andre Coleman stepped out of his modest apartment. At 32, Andre was the epitome of a dedicated soldier. His broad shoulders and muscular frame a testament to years of rigorous training and combat experience. His dark skin glistened with a thin sheen of sweat as he adjusted his uniform, ensuring every detail was perfect. Andre's mind drifted to his childhood in Atlanta, where he'd grown up under the watchful eyes of his parents, Marcus and Evelyn Coleman. He could still hear his father's deep voice, filled with pride and concern, the day Andre announced his decision to enlist. "Son," Marcus had said, placing a firm hand on Andre's shoulder, "serving your country is a noble calling. But remember, it's not just about wearing the uniform. It's about upholding the values we've taught you: integrity, courage, and compassion." Evelyn, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, had added, "And never forget where you came from, baby. Your roots will keep you grounded when the world tries to shake you." Those words had stayed with Andre through basic training, through his first deployment, and now, after multiple tours in various conflict zones. They were the bedrock of his character, shaping him into the leader he'd become. As Andre made his way across the base, familiar faces greeted him with respect and admiration. He'd earned a reputation as a fair and courageous leader, someone who always put his team first. But there was one person Andre considered more than just a comrade in arms. "Hey, Superman," a voice called out. Andre turned to see Lieutenant John Williams jogging towards him, a broad grin on his face. "John," Andre greeted warmly, clasping his friend's hand. "Ready for another day in paradise?" John chuckled, falling in a step beside Andre. "With you leading us?" "Always." Their friendship had blossomed during their first tour together in Afghanistan. Despite their different backgrounds, John hailing from a small town in Iowa, they'd found common ground in their dedication to their duty and their squad. "Heard anything about our next mission?" John asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Andre shook his head. "Nothing concrete, but there's been chatter about increased activity in the eastern region. We might be heading out soon." As they approached the briefing room, Andre's instincts proved correct. Captain Sarah Martinez, their commanding officer, was waiting for them with a grim expression. "Gentlemen," she said, "we've got a situation." The next few hours were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Intelligence had uncovered a heavily fortified enemy outpost hidden in a mountain pass. Their mission: infiltrate, gather intel, and neutralize any immediate threats. As Andre studied the terrain maps, a knot formed in his stomach. The approach was treacherous, with limited cover and multiple vantage points for enemy snipers. But he pushed his concerns aside, focusing on formulating a strategy that would keep his team safe. The following day, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky, Andre's squad moved silently through the rugged landscape. The air was thick with tension, each soldier hyper-aware of their surroundings. They were halfway to their objective when all hell broke loose. The crack of gunfire shattered the morning stillness. Andre's training kicked in instantly. "Take cover," he shouted, diving behind a large boulder. Bullets ricocheted off rocks around them as Andre assessed the situation. They were pinned down, caught in a deadly crossfire between two enemy positions. "Williams," Andre called out, "can you see the source of that fire from your position?" John, crouched behind a fallen tree trunk, shouted back, "Negative. They got us zeroed in." Andre's mind raced. They couldn't stay here. It was only a matter of time before the enemy flanked them. But any movement would expose them to even more fire. That's when he saw it. a narrow ravine to their left. If they could reach it, it would provide cover and a path to outflank the enemy. But someone would need to provide covering fire, drawing the enemy's attention away from the rest of the squad. Andre knew what he had to do. "Listen up," he shouted over the din of battle. "On my signal, everyone make for that ravine to our left. Move in pairs, leapfrog style. I'll cover you." "Sarge, that's suicide," John protested. Andre met his friend's eyes, his gaze unwavering. "It's our only shot. Get them out of here, John. That's an order." Before anyone could argue further, Andre sprang into action. He burst from cover, unleashing a barrage of fire towards the enemy positions. The gambit worked. The hostile fire immediately concentrated on him. "Go! Go! Go!" Andre yelled, ducking and weaving as bullets whizzed past him. His squad didn't hesitate. They moved swiftly, each pair providing cover for the next as they made their way to safety. Andre's heart pounded in his chest as he continued to draw fire, his ammunition rapidly depleting. Just as the last of his team reached the ravine, a searing pain exploded in Andre's left shoulder. He stumbled, nearly losing his footing, but managed to dive behind a large rock. "Andre!" John's voice carried over the gunfire. "We're clear. Fall back." Gritting his teeth against the pain, Andre pushed himself up. He sprinted towards the ravine, zigzagging to avoid the hail of bullets. With a final burst of energy, he threw himself into the relative safety of the ravine, rolling to a stop at John's feet. "You crazy son of a gun," John muttered, quickly assessing Andre's wound. "What were you thinking?" Andre managed a weak smile. "That my mama would kill me if I let anything happen to you guys." Despite the gravity of the situation, a ripple of nervous laughter spread through the squad. It was short-lived, however, as they realized they weren't out of danger yet. "All right, listen up," Andre said, wincing as he sat up straighter. "We got the high ground now. Johnson, Peters, I want you to set up overwatch positions. The rest of you, we're going to circle around and hit them from behind. They won't be expecting that." His team moved with practiced efficiency, each soldier knowing their role. Andre, despite John's protests, insisted on leading the assault team. What followed was a textbook example of tactical superiority. Andre's team, using the element of surprise and their superior position, quickly overwhelmed the enemy forces. Within an hour, the outpost was secure, and a wealth of valuable intelligence was in their hands. As the adrenaline of battle faded, the pain in Andre's shoulder returned with a vengeance. John, noticing his friend's pallor, called for the medic. "You've lost a lot of blood, Sarge," the medic said as he worked on Andre's wound. "We need to get you evac'd ASAP." Andre shook his head. "Not until we're all out of here safely. I'm not leaving my team." And true to his word, Andre stayed with his squad until they were all safely back at base. It was only then, as the medical team rushed him into surgery, that he finally allowed himself to succumb to exhaustion. Days later, as Andre recovered in the base hospital, news of their mission spread like wildfire. Soldiers from other units stopped by to shake his hand, praising his bravery and leadership. "You should be getting a medal for this, Sarge," one young private said earnestly. Andre just shook his head, uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what anyone would do." It was a team effort, but the whispers of recognition continued to grow. Andre's squad, led by John, became his most vocal advocates, recounting the tale of his selfless actions to anyone who would listen. However, as the days passed, a different kind of whisper began to circulate. At first, it was just a few overheard conversations, quickly hushed when others approached. But gradually, the murmurs grew louder, impossible to ignore. "You hear about Sergeant Coleman?" Andre overheard one day as he was being discharged from the hospital. "Word is he might get passed over for recognition." "What? Why?" Another voice responded. "After what he did?" There was a pause before the first voice replied, lower this time. "Some folks are saying it's because of his, background." Andre felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He'd faced discrimination before, but never so blatantly in his military career. He'd always believed that on the battlefield, the only color that mattered was the red, white, and blue of the flag they served. As he made his way back to his quarters, Andre's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He thought of his parents, of the values they'd instilled in him. He thought of his squad, of the trust and respect they shared. And he thought of the oath he'd taken to serve and protect, regardless of the cost. Andre knew the road ahead might be challenging, but he was determined to face it with the same courage and integrity he'd shown on the battlefield. Whatever came next, he would stand tall, proud of who he was and what he'd accomplished. As he reached his door, Andre paused, taking a deep breath. He may not be able to control what others thought or did, but he could control his own actions. And he would continue to lead by example, to be the best soldier and man he could be. With renewed resolve, Andre stepped into his quarters, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun had barely risen over Fort Bragg when the announcement crackled through the base's intercom system. A prestigious award ceremony was to be held in 2 days' time, honoring soldiers for their exceptional bravery in recent missions. The news spread like wildfire, and within minutes, Andre's phone was buzzing with messages from his excited squad members. "Sarge, this is it." John's voice boomed through the speaker. "They're finally going to give you that medal you deserve." Andre couldn't help but smile at his friend's enthusiasm, even as a knot of uncertainty formed in his stomach. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, John. Nothing's certain yet." "Are you kidding me?" John retorted. "After what you did, they'd have to be blind not to see it." As Andre hung up, he caught his reflection in the mirror. The bandage on his shoulder was a stark reminder of the mission that had led to this moment. He touched it gently, remembering the chaos, the fear, and the split-second decision that had saved his team. Over the next 2 days, Andre found himself caught in a whirlwind of preparation. There were dress uniforms to be pressed, shoes to be polished, and an endless stream of well-wishers to greet. His squad members took turns dropping by, each more excited than the last. "My money's on the Silver Star," Private Johnson declared confidently during one such visit. Maybe even the Distinguished Service Cross. Andre appreciated their support, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling of uncertainty. He'd been in the military long enough to know that things didn't always work out the way they should. It was on the eve of the ceremony that Andre first heard the name that would come to cast a shadow over the proceedings. He was in the mess hall, half listening to the chatter around him, when he caught a snippet of conversation from a nearby table. "Colonel Robert Simmons is heading the selection committee this year," one officer was saying in a low voice. "You know what that means?" "Yeah," another replied grimly. "Another year of the old boys club getting all the glory." Andre's ears perked up. He'd heard of Colonel Simmons before, a high-ranking officer with a reputation for being old school. As he listened, he learned more. Simmons had a history of favoring certain types of soldiers for awards and promotions, often overlooking others despite their merits. "Remember what happened to Captain Ramirez last year?" The first officer continued. "Best damn pilot in the squadron, saved a whole platoon from certain death, and Simmons passed her over for some desk jockey who'd never seen combat." Andre felt a chill run down his spine. He tried to push the thought away, to focus on the pride his family would feel seeing him honored. But as he lay in bed that night, sleep eluded him, his mind racing with possibilities both good and bad. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. Andre stood before his mirror, meticulously adjusting his dress uniform. Each medal and ribbon told a story of service, of sacrifice, of duty fulfilled. As he pinned the last one in place, a soft knock at the door broke his concentration. "Andre? Baby, are you ready?" Andre opened the door to find his mother, Evelyn, beaming up at him. Behind her stood his father, Marcus, looking sharp in his Sunday best, and his younger sister, Aisha, practically bouncing with excitement. "Look at you," Evelyn breathed, reaching up to straighten Andre's collar. "My brave boy. A hero." "Mom," Andre protested weakly, but he couldn't hide his smile. His father's strong hand clasped his shoulder, conveying pride without words. "Let's go show these folks what a real soldier looks like," Marcus said, his voice gruff with emotion. As they made their way to the ceremony grounds, Andre was struck by the atmosphere of anticipation that hung in the air. Soldiers and their families milled about, all dressed in their finest. The stage at the front was adorned with flags and banners, a podium standing ready at its center. Andre's squad found them quickly, John leading the charge. "There he is," John called out, grinning from ear to ear. "The man of the hour." As they exchanged greetings, Andre noticed a tall, distinguished-looking man in full dress uniform making his way towards the stage. The conversations around him hushed, and he heard someone whisper, "That's him. Colonel Simmons." Andre studied the man who held his fate in his hands. Colonel Simmons moved with the confidence of someone used to being in charge, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, his uniform impeccable. As he passed by their group, Simmons' gaze swept over them, lingering for just a moment on Andre. Something in that look, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, sent a chill down Andre's spine. Before he could dwell on it, a voice came over the loudspeaker, asking everyone to take their seats. Andre found himself sandwiched between his parents, with Aisha on their mother's other side and his squad filling the row behind them. The ceremony began with a series of speeches from various high-ranking officials. Andre listened with half an ear, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Finally, Colonel Simmons took the podium, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and most importantly, the brave men and women of our armed forces," Simmons began. "We gather here today to honor those who have gone above and beyond the call of duty, who have demonstrated exceptional valor in the face of grave danger." As Simmons spoke about honor, courage, and sacrifice, Andre felt his mother's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. He returned the pressure, drawing strength from her unwavering support. "The medals we present today," Simmons continued, "are not mere decorations. They are symbols of the highest ideals of our military: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage." Andre couldn't help but feel that these words were directed at him. Hadn't he demonstrated all of these qualities in that fateful mission? The memory of bullets whizzing past, of the burning pain in his shoulder as he drew enemy fire away from his team, flashed through his mind. "And now," Simmons said, his voice dropping dramatically, "we come to the moment you've all been waiting for. The presentation of awards." The tension in the air was palpable as Simmons began reading out names. With each medal presented, each round of applause, Andre felt his heart rate increase. His palms grew sweaty, and he wiped them surreptitiously on his trousers. "You've got this, son," his father whispered, noticing his nervousness. But as the list of names grew longer, and Andre's remained unspoken, a creeping sense of dread began to take hold. He glanced at John, seated behind him, and saw his own confusion mirrored in his friend's face. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Colonel Simmons cleared his throat. "And that concludes our awards presentation for today. Thank you all for your service, and God bless America." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a low murmur began to spread through the crowd. Andre sat, stunned, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. He had been overlooked. "There must be some mistake," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "They forgot to call your name, baby. We should go talk to someone." But Andre knew, with a sinking certainty, that there had been no mistake. He had been deliberately passed over. As people began to stand, to mill about in confused groups, Andre felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up to see John, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "This is bull," John spat. "Absolute bull. You saved our lives out there, Sarge. You took a bullet for us? How could they not recognize that?" Andre stood slowly, feeling as if he were moving through molasses. "It's all right, John," he heard himself say, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "These things happen, but it wasn't all right." Andre could see it in the tears his mother was trying to hide, in the rigid set of his father's jaw, in the fire blazing in Aisha's eyes. He could feel it in the shocked silence of his squad, in the pitying glances thrown his way by other soldiers. As they made their way out of the ceremony grounds, Andre felt as if every eye was on him. He held his head high, his back straight, even as he felt something crumbling inside him. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Andre's family insisted on taking him out to dinner, as they had planned to celebrate. The meal was a somber affair, punctuated by attempts at cheerfulness that fell flat. "You're still our hero," Aisha declared fiercely over dessert. Medal or no medal. Andre managed to smile for her sake, but inside, he was grappling with a storm of emotions. Disappointment, anger, confusion. They swirled within him, threatening to overwhelm his usual calm demeanor. That night, after his family had gone back to their hotel, Andre sat alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The soldier who looked back at him was the same one who had led his team to safety, who had put his life on the line without hesitation. So, why didn't the powers that be see that? A knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. He opened it to find John standing there, a determined look on his face. "We're not letting this go, Sarge," John said without preamble. "The whole squad's talking about it. We're going to file a formal complaint, go up the chain of command if we have to." Andre sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "I appreciate that, John. I really do. But maybe it's better to just let it go." "Let it go?" John's voice rose in disbelief. "After what you did for us? No way. This isn't right, and you know it." Andre knew John was right. It wasn't fair, but a lifetime of experience had taught him that fairness wasn't always a given, especially for someone who looked like him. "Sometimes," Andre said slowly, "the fight isn't worth the cost. We do our duty not for recognition, but because it's the right thing to do." John looked at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're a better man than me, Sarge. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." As John walked away, Andre closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. He knew that tomorrow would bring more questions, more anger from his squad, more tearful concern from his family. For now, though, he just wanted to sleep, to escape the disappointment and hurt that threatened to overwhelm him. But sleep proved elusive. Andre tossed and turned, his mind replaying the events of the day. He thought of Colonel Simmons' cold gaze, of the names called that weren't his, of the pride in his mother's eyes, turning to confusion and then to sorrow. In the early hours of the morning, Andre finally drifted off into a fitful sleep. His dreams were a chaotic mix of battlefield scenes and award ceremonies, where he reached for medals that always remained just out of grasp. He awoke to the sound of his phone buzzing. Groggily, he reached for it, seeing a string of messages from his squad members. They were all variations on the same theme: outrage at the injustice, promises to fight for him, assurances that he deserved better. As touched as he was by their support, Andre felt a weariness settle over him. He had joined the military to serve his country, to make a difference. He had never sought glory or accolades. But now, faced with this blatant oversight, he couldn't help but question everything. A soft knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. He opened it to find his mother standing there, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. "Oh, baby," she said, pulling him into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry. You deserved that medal. You deserved all of them." Andre hugged her back, feeling a lump form in his throat. "It's okay, Mom," he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "Really, it's not about the medals." Evelyn pulled back, holding him at arm's length. "Don't you dare downplay this, Andre Coleman," she said, her voice stern despite the tears in her eyes. "What they did wasn't right. Your father and we raised you to stand up for yourself, to know your worth." "I know, Mom," Andre said softly. "And I do know my worth. A medal doesn't change what I did out there, or who I am." His mother looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, of course. You're so much stronger than I am. But it still hurts to see you treated this way." As they talked, Andre felt some of the tension he'd been carrying start to ease. His mother's unwavering belief in him, her fierce pride, helped to soothe the sting of the previous day's disappointment. Later that morning, as Andre walked his family to their car, he was struck by a sense of déjà vu. Hadn't he stood in this very spot years ago, saying goodbye as he left for basic training? His father had clapped him on the shoulder then, telling him to make them proud. Now Marcus pulled him into a bear hug. "You've already made us prouder than we could have ever imagined," Marcus said gruffly. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Aisha was the last to say goodbye, her eyes still flashing with indignation. "This isn't over, big brother," she declared. "I'm going to write to every newspaper, every TV station. The world needs to know what a hero you are." Despite everything, Andre found himself chuckling. "Easy there, firecracker," he said, ruffling her hair. "No need for all that. Just knowing you all believe in me is enough." As he watched their car drive away, Andre felt a curious mix of emotions. The hurt and disappointment were still there, but they were tempered now by the love and support of his family, the loyalty of his squad. He turned back towards the base, squaring his shoulders. Whatever came next, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same courage and integrity he'd always shown. Medal or no medal, he was still Sergeant Andre Coleman, and he had a job to do. As he walked, Andre's phone buzzed with a message. It was from John. "Emergency squad meeting. My quarters. ASAP." Andre sighed, knowing that his friend hadn't given up on the idea of fighting this injustice. Part of him wanted to ignore the message, to let sleeping dogs lie. But a larger part, the part that had always pushed him to stand up for what was right, propelled him forward. When he arrived at John's quarters, he found the entire squad crammed into the small space. The air was thick with tension and barely suppressed anger. "All right, Sarge," John said as soon as Andre entered. "We've been talking and we've got a plan. We're going to go straight to the top, file a formal complaint about Colonel Simmons and this whole messed-up selection process." Andre looked around at the determined faces of his team. These were the men and women he'd risked his life for, who had followed him into danger without question. He owed it to them to at least hear them out. "I appreciate what you're all trying to do," he began carefully. "But we need to think about the bigger picture here. Rocking the boat could have consequences for all of us. So we're just supposed to sit back and let them treat you like this?" Private Johnson burst out. "After everything you've done for us?" Andre held up a hand, silencing the murmurs of agreement. "I'm not saying we do nothing, but we need to be smart about this. Going in guns blazing isn't going to solve anything." As they debated their options, Andre felt a resolve building within him. Yes, he had been wronged. Yes, the system had failed him. But he had always believed in working within the system to effect change. Maybe this was his opportunity to do just that. "Here's what we're going to do," he said finally, his voice cutting through the chatter. "We're going to document everything. Every mission, every commendation, every piece of evidence that shows what really happened out there. And then we're going to present it through the proper channels." He looked around at his squad, seeing the fire in their eyes start to focus into determination. "It might not change anything right away," he continued, "but it will create a record. And maybe, just maybe, it will help make sure this doesn't happen to someone else down the line." As his squad nodded in agreement, Andre felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He might not have gotten the recognition he deserved, but he had something far more valuable: the loyalty and respect of the people who mattered most. The road ahead would be challenging, he knew. There would be obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But standing there, surrounded by his team, Andre felt ready to face whatever came next. Medal or no medal, he was a soldier, a leader, and a man of integrity. And that, he realized, was the greatest honor of all. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg as Sergeant Andre Coleman made his way to the mess hall. 2 days had passed since the award ceremony, and while the initial shock and disappointment had subsided, a dull ache still lingered in his chest. He'd thrown himself into his duties, determined to move forward, but the whispers and sympathetic glances from his fellow soldiers were constant reminders of what had transpired. As Andre entered the mess hall, he noticed an unusual buzz of activity. Soldiers were huddled around phones and tablets, their breakfasts forgotten. Frowning, he made his way to the serving line, trying to catch snippets of conversation. "Did you see the news? I can't believe it. About time someone did something." Curiosity piqued. Andre was about to ask what was going on when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see John, his face flushed with excitement. "Sarge, you're not going to believe this," John said, thrusting his phone into Andre's hands. "The Secretary of Defense just made an announcement. It's all over the news." Andre's eyes widened as he scanned the headline. "Secretary of Defense addresses military award controversy, announces new commendation." Before he could read further, the mess hall's television screens flickered to life, drawing everyone's attention. The familiar face of Secretary of Defense Eleanor Hawkins filled the screens, her expression stern yet compassionate. "My fellow Americans," she began, her voice resonating through the now silent hall. "I come before you today to address a matter of great importance to our military and our nation as a whole." Andre felt the eyes of his fellow soldiers on him, but he couldn't look away from the screen. Recent events have brought to light issues within our military awards process that cannot and will not be ignored, Secretary Hawkins continued. "Let me be clear. Bravery, integrity, and leadership are the cornerstones of our armed forces. These qualities know no color, no gender, no background. They are the essence of what makes our military the finest in the world." A murmur rippled through the mess hall. Andre felt his heart rate quicken, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "It has come to my attention that certain individuals within our ranks have allowed personal biases to influence decisions that should be based solely on merit," the secretary said, her tone leaving no doubt about the seriousness of the situation. "This is unacceptable and goes against everything our military stands for." Though she didn't mention any names, Andre knew she was referring to Colonel Simmons and the recent award ceremony. He glanced around, noticing the grim nods of agreement from his fellow soldiers. "In light of these events," Secretary Hawkins continued, "I am announcing a comprehensive review of our awards process. We will ensure that every act of bravery, every demonstration of exceptional leadership is recognized and honored, regardless of the individual's background or circumstances." The mess hall erupted in applause, but Secretary Hawkins held up a hand, silencing the crowd. "But we're not stopping there," she said, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "Today, I am proud to announce the creation of a new commendation, the Valor and Integrity Medal." Andre felt John's hand grip his shoulder tightly. "This medal," the secretary explained, "will be awarded to those who have not only shown exceptional bravery in combat, but have also demonstrated the highest levels of integrity and leadership. It is a recognition that true heroism extends beyond the battlefield, encompassing the character and conduct of our finest soldiers." The excitement in the mess hall was palpable now. Soldiers were exchanging glances, whispering amongst themselves. Andre stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe. "And it gives me great pleasure," Secretary Hawkins said, her voice filled with pride, "to announce the first recipient of this prestigious award, Sergeant Andre Coleman of Fort Bragg, North Carolina." The mess hall exploded in cheers. Andre felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He stared at the screen in disbelief as Secretary Hawkins continued. "Sergeant Coleman's actions during a recent mission exemplify the very essence of this new commendation. Not only did he display extraordinary courage under fire, saving the lives of his entire squad, but he has also shown remarkable integrity and leadership in the face of adversity." John was shaking Andre vigorously now, his face split in a wide grin. "You did it, Sarge. You did it." But Andre could barely hear him over the roar in his ears and the continued cheers of his fellow soldiers. On the screen, Secretary Hawkins was still speaking. "I will be personally visiting Fort Bragg later today to present this medal to Sergeant Coleman," she announced. "His bravery and his character have set a new standard for our military, one that we would all do well to aspire to." As the broadcast ended, Andre found himself surrounded by a sea of congratulatory faces. Hands reached out to shake his, voices raised in celebration. It was overwhelming, almost too much to process. All right, give the man some space," John's voice cut through the chaos. He managed to create a small bubble around Andre, guiding him to a nearby table. Andre sank into a chair, his legs feeling suddenly weak. "I can't believe it," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Believe it, Sarge," John said, beaming. "It's about damn time you got the recognition you deserve." As the initial shock began to wear off, Andre felt a warmth spreading through his chest. It wasn't just about the medal, he realized. It was about what it represented, an acknowledgement of not just his actions, but of who he was as a person and a leader. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Andre was whisked away to prepare for the secretary's visit, his uniform pressed to perfection. His boots shined to a mirror gleam. All the while, his phone buzzed incessantly with messages of congratulations from his family, friends, and fellow soldiers. As the afternoon sun climbed high in the sky, Andre found himself standing at attention on the parade ground, surrounded by what seemed like the entire population of Fort Bragg. The anticipation in the air was electric as a sleek black vehicle pulled up. Secretary of Defense Eleanor Hawkins stepped out, her presence commanding immediate respect. She was shorter than Andre had expected, but her bearing was that of a woman used to wielding great power and responsibility. As she approached, Andre snapped to an even more rigid attention, his heart pounding in his chest. The secretary stopped before him, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Sergeant Coleman," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed parade ground. "It's an honor to meet you." "The honor is mine, Madam Secretary," Andre replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. Secretary Hawkins smiled, then turned to address the assembled crowd. "Today," she began, "we are not just recognizing one man's bravery. We are reaffirming the values that make our military and our nation great." She spoke of courage, of integrity, of the unwavering commitment to duty that defined true heroes. With each word, Andre felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for every soldier who had ever put their life on the line for their country and their comrades. "Sergeant Coleman's actions in the field were extraordinary," the secretary continued. "Faced with overwhelming odds, he put the safety of his squad before his own, drawing enemy fire to allow his team to reach safety. Even after being wounded, he continued to lead, ensuring that every member of his squad returned home." Andre could hear murmurs of approval from the crowd. He caught sight of John and the rest of his squad, their faces beaming with pride. "But it is not just Sergeant Coleman's actions on the battlefield that we honor today," Secretary Hawkins said, her tone becoming more solemn. "It is also his conduct in the face of adversity, his unwavering integrity, and his leadership both in and out of combat that truly set him apart." She turned back to Andre, and he was struck by the intensity of her gaze. "Sergeant Coleman," she said, "your bravery saved lives. Your integrity inspired those around you. And your leadership, even in the face of injustice, has set an example for us all." With a nod to an aide, Secretary Hawkins was handed a small box. She opened it, revealing a medal unlike any Andre had seen before. It gleamed in the sunlight, a tangible symbol of everything he had fought for and believed in. "It is my great honor," the secretary said, her voice ringing out across the parade ground, "to present you with the first Valor and Integrity Medal. May it serve as a reminder of the highest ideals of our armed forces and of the extraordinary individual who exemplifies them." As Secretary Hawkins pinned the medal to Andre's chest, he felt a surge of emotions: pride, humility, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This wasn't just a personal victory, he realized. It was a statement, a challenge to the entire military to live up to the ideals it professed. The secretary stepped back, offering Andre a crisp salute which he returned with perfect precision. As applause erupted around them, she leaned in close, speaking softly, so only he could hear. "Your actions have set in motion changes that were long overdue, Sergeant," she said. "You should be proud." As the applause began to die down, Andre noticed a figure standing at the back of the crowd. Colonel Simmons stood rigid, his face a mask of discomfort. The colonel's eyes darted around, never quite meeting Andre's gaze. Secretary Hawkins stepped away from Andre, her eyes scanning the crowd. When she spotted Colonel Simmons, her expression hardened. She made her way towards him, the crowd parting before her. "Colonel Simmons," she said, her voice low but firm. "A word, if you please." The colonel straightened, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Of course, Madam Secretary." As they moved to a more private area, Andre could just make out the secretary's words. "Your actions, Colonel, have not gone unnoticed. There will be a full review." The rest of her words were lost in the crowd's chatter, but the implication was clear. Change was coming, and those who resisted it would face consequences. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of speeches, handshakes, and photographs. By the time it was over, the sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the parade ground. As the crowd began to disperse, Andre found himself surrounded by his squad. John was the first to reach him, pulling him into a bear hug. "I told you, didn't I?" John said, his voice thick with emotion. "I told you they couldn't ignore what you did." One by one, the rest of the squad offered their congratulations, each of them touching the new medal with a mix of awe and pride. Andre felt overwhelmed by their support, their unwavering belief in him. "This is as much yours as it is mine," he told them, his voice husky. "I couldn't have done any of it without you." As the squad dispersed, promising to meet later for a proper celebration, Andre found himself alone for the first time since the announcement. He walked slowly across the now empty parade ground, his hand absently touching the medal on his chest. He thought about the journey that had led him to this moment, the challenges he'd faced, the obstacles he'd overcome. He thought about his parents, about the values they'd instilled in him. He thought about every soldier who had ever been overlooked or undervalued because of their race, gender, or background. This medal, Andre realized, was more than just a personal accolade. It was a symbol of change, a beacon of hope for a more equitable and just military. And with that realization came a renewed sense of purpose. As he reached the edge of the parade ground, Andre paused, looking back at the place where he'd received the medal. He made a silent vow to himself, to his fellow soldiers, and to his country. He would continue to lead by example, to fight for what was right, to embody the values this medal represented. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple. Andre took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and began the walk back to his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities. But for now, he allowed himself to savor this moment of triumph, of vindication, of hope for a better future. As he walked, Andre's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to find a message from his mother. "We saw the news, baby. We're so proud of you. Your father can't stop crying. Call us when you can." A lump formed in Andre's throat as he read the message. He thought about how far he'd come, about the little boy from Atlanta who had dreamed of serving his country. That boy could never have imagined this moment, this honor. Andre typed out a quick reply, promising to call soon, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. As he continued his walk, he noticed other soldiers stopping to salute him, their faces filled with a new respect. It was a reminder of the weight of responsibility that came with this recognition. When he finally reached his quarters, Andre closed the door behind him and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. The events of the day washed over him. The surprise announcement, the secretary's visit, the ceremony, the pride in his squad's eyes. He moved to the small mirror hanging on the wall, studying his reflection. The new medal gleamed on his chest, a stark contrast to the familiar ribbons and insignia. But it wasn't the medal that caught his attention. It was the look in his own eyes, a mix of pride, determination, and a newfound sense of purpose. A knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. Opening it, he found John standing there, a bottle of champagne in one hand and a group of grinning squad members behind him. "Hope you didn't think we'd let you spend tonight alone, Sarge," John said with a wink. "We've got some celebrating to do." Andre couldn't help but smile. "All right, come on in," he said, stepping aside to let them enter. "But remember, we've still got duty tomorrow." As his friends filed in, filling the small space with laughter and chatter, Andre felt a warmth spread through his chest. This, he realized, was what it was all about. Not the medals or the recognition, but the bonds forged in service, the unbreakable ties of loyalty and respect. The night wore on, filled with toasts and stories, laughter and quiet moments of reflection. As Andre looked around at the faces of his squad, he saw in them the future of the military, diverse, dedicated, united in their commitment to serving their country and each other. It was well past midnight when the last of his friends left, each offering a final congratulation and a promise to see him in the morning. As Andre closed the door behind them, he felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He moved to the window, looking out at the quiet base. Somewhere out there, he knew, were other soldiers like him, men and women facing their own challenges, fighting their own battles for recognition and respect. His thoughts turned to the future, to the changes his story might inspire. The Valor and Integrity Medal wasn't just a personal honor, he realized. It was a challenge to the entire military establishment, a call to live up to its highest ideals. And Andre knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that he would spend the rest of his career working to ensure that every soldier, regardless of their background, had the opportunity to be recognized for their true worth. As he finally prepared for bed, Andre carefully removed the medal, placing it on his bedside table. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities. But for now, in the quiet of the night, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his accomplishment. He thought of his parents, of the pride in their voices when he'd finally called them. He thought of his sister Aisha, who had declared her intention to follow in his footsteps and join the military. He thought of every person who had supported him, believed in him, fought for him. As he drifted off to sleep, Andre's last thoughts were not of the medal, but of the future it represented. A future where courage, integrity, and leadership were recognized and celebrated in all their forms. A future he was now uniquely positioned to help create. The next morning dawned bright and clear, finding Andre already awake and preparing for the day ahead. As he donned his uniform, carefully pinning the new medal in place, he felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him. He stepped out of his quarters, squaring his shoulders as he faced the new day. The base was already bustling with activity, and Andre could feel the eyes of his fellow soldiers on him as he made his way to the command center. There were nods of respect, salutes offered with a new level of reverence. As he entered the building, Andre was immediately approached by his commanding officer, Major Sarah Martinez. Her face was serious, but there was a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Sergeant Coleman," she said, "I need to see you in my office immediately." Andre followed her, his mind racing. What could this be about? As they entered her office, he was surprised to see Secretary Hawkins herself waiting for them, along with several other high-ranking officers. "Sergeant," the secretary greeted him warmly. "I hope you don't mind us dropping in like this, but we have some important matters to discuss." Over the next hour, Andre listened in amazement as the secretary and the other officers laid out their plans. The Valor and Integrity Medal, it turned out, was just the beginning. They were implementing a comprehensive overhaul of the military's promotion and recognition systems, aimed at eliminating bias and ensuring that merit was the sole criterion for advancement. "And we want you to be a part of it, Sergeant Coleman," Secretary Hawkins said. "Your experiences, your insights, they'll be invaluable as we move forward with these changes." Andre felt a mix of emotions, honor at being asked to participate in such important work, and a weighty sense of responsibility. He thought of all the soldiers who had faced discrimination or been overlooked, of the changes this could mean for their futures. "I'd be honored, Madam Secretary," Andre replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. "What exactly did you have in mind?" Secretary Hawkins smiled, a look of approval in her eyes. "We're forming a special task force," she explained. "Its mission will be to review and revise our current systems, to ensure that every soldier, regardless of their background, has an equal opportunity for recognition and advancement." Major Martinez chimed in, her voice filled with pride. "We want you to be a key member of this task force, Sergeant Coleman. Your recent experiences, combined with your exemplary service record, make you uniquely qualified for this role." Andre's mind raced with the implications. This was an opportunity to effect real change, to help shape the future of the military he loved. But it would also mean new challenges, potentially facing resistance from those who preferred the status quo. "I understand this is a lot to take in," Secretary Hawkins said, noticing Andre's thoughtful expression. "You don't have to decide right away. Take some time to dash." "No need, Madam Secretary," Andre interrupted, his resolve solidifying. "I'm in. If my experiences can help make our military stronger and more equitable, then I have a duty to contribute." The secretary's face broke into a wide smile. "That's exactly the attitude we were hoping for, Sergeant. Welcome aboard." The next few hours were a whirlwind of briefings and introductions. Andre met the other members of the task force, a diverse group of officers and enlisted personnel from all branches of the military. Each had their own stories of overcoming adversity, of pushing for change within the system. As the day wore on, Andre found himself energized by the possibilities ahead. This was more than just a new assignment. It was a chance to make a lasting impact, to ensure that future generations of soldiers would be judged solely on their merits and actions. By the time he left the command center that evening, Andre's head was spinning with plans and ideas. He made his way back to his quarters, eager to share the news with his squad. He found them waiting outside his door, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. "Everything okay, Sard?" John asked as Andre approached. "We heard you got called in to see the brass this morning." Andre couldn't keep the smile off his face. "More than okay, John. I've got some news to share with all of you." As they crowded into his quarters, Andre filled them in on the events of the day. He watched their expressions change from concern to excitement as they realized the significance of what was happening. "This is huge, Sarge," Private Johnson said, her eyes wide. "You're going to be able to make real changes." Andre nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "That's the plan. But I'm going to need all of your help. This isn't just about me. It's about making things better for all of us and for every soldier who comes after us." The squad exchanged glances, then turned back to Andre with determined expressions. "You know we've got your back, Sarge," John said, speaking for all of them. "Whatever you need, we're here." As his friends voiced their support, Andre felt a surge of gratitude. This was why he had joined the military in the first place, to be part of something bigger than himself, to make a difference. The conversation continued late into the night, with the squad offering ideas and suggestions for the task force. Andre listened carefully, making mental notes. These were the voices that needed to be heard. He realized the everyday soldiers who knew firsthand the challenges and inequities within the system. As his friends finally began to file out, each offering a final word of congratulations or support, Andre found himself overcome with emotion. He caught John's arm as he was leaving. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Andre said, his voice thick. "Without all of you. You know that, right?" John smiled, clasping Andre's shoulder. "We know, Sarge, but you're the one who made it happen. You're the one who never gave up, who always did the right thing, no matter what. We're just glad the rest of the world is finally seeing what we've always known." After John left, Andre stood in the quiet of his quarters, reflecting on the whirlwind of changes that had swept through his life in just a few short days. From the disappointment of the award ceremony to the creation of the new medal, and now this new role on the task force, it was almost too much to process. He moved to the window, looking out at the base spread out before him. Somewhere out there were countless other soldiers, each with their own stories, their own struggles. Andre made a silent promise to them all. He would do everything in his power to ensure that their voices were heard, that their contributions were recognized. As he prepared for bed, Andre's eyes fell on the Valor and Integrity Medal, still sitting on his bedside table. He picked it up, running his fingers over its surface. It wasn't just a piece of metal, he realized. It was a symbol of change, a beacon of hope for a better future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities. But as Andre drifted off to sleep, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he'd ever known. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that he had the support of his squad, the backing of leaders like Secretary Hawkins, and the strength of his own convictions to guide him. In the quiet of the night, as the base settled into silence, Andre Coleman dreamed of a future where every soldier, regardless of their background, had the opportunity to shine. And he knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that he would play a part in making that dream a reality. The dawn of a new day brought with it a sense of anticipation and purpose for Andre. As he donned his uniform, carefully pinning the Valor and Integrity Medal in place, he felt the weight of his new responsibilities settling on his shoulders. His first official meeting with the task force was scheduled for later that morning. As he made his way across the base, Andre found himself hyper-aware of the looks and nods of respect he received from his fellow soldiers. It was a stark reminder of how quickly things had changed and of the influence he now wielded. Entering the conference room, Andre was greeted by the diverse faces of the task force members. There was an energy in the air, a sense of shared purpose that was almost palpable. Secretary Hawkins called the meeting to order, her voice filled with determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have before us an unprecedented opportunity to reshape the very foundations of our military. Our goal is nothing less than to create a system where every soldier, regardless of their background, has an equal chance to succeed and be recognized for their contributions." As the meeting progressed, Andre found himself deeply engaged in discussions about everything from recruitment practices to promotion criteria. He shared his own experiences, both good and bad, and listened intently to the stories and insights of his fellow task force members. One particular moment stood out to Andre. A young lieutenant, her voice shaking slightly with emotion, recounted her own struggles with discrimination within the ranks. "It's not just about the big moments," she said. "It's the small, everyday things too. The assumptions people make, the opportunities that never materialize." Andre nodded in understanding, feeling a connection with the lieutenant's words. He spoke up, his voice carrying across the room. "That's exactly why our work here is so important," he said. "We're not just changing policies on paper. We're working to change the culture, to create an environment where every soldier feels valued and respected." As the meeting drew to a close, Secretary Hawkins approached Andre. "You've got a real gift, Sergeant Coleman," she said, her voice low. "The way you connect with people, the way you articulate these complex issues, it's invaluable to our cause." Andre felt a flush of pride at her words, but also a renewed sense of responsibility. "Thank you, Madam Secretary," he replied. "I just want to make sure we get this right. There's too much at stake to do anything less." As he left the meeting, Andre's mind was buzzing with ideas and plans. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, that there would be resistance and setbacks. But he also knew that the work they were doing had the potential to transform the military, to make it truly live up to its ideals of honor, courage, and commitment. Walking back to his quarters, Andre found himself thinking about his family, about his parents who had always believed in him, about his sister Aisha who looked up to him. He thought about John and the rest of his squad, about every soldier who had ever faced discrimination or been overlooked. This, he realized, was his true calling. The Valor and Integrity Medal wasn't just a recognition of his past actions. It was a charge to continue fighting for what was right, to be a voice for those who had been silenced. As the sun began to set over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the grounds, Andre Coleman stood tall, his resolve stronger than ever. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that his actions had the power to shape not just his own future, but the future of the entire military. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but Andre was prepared to meet it head-on. With the support of his fellow task force members, the backing of leaders like Secretary Hawkins, and the strength of his own convictions, he knew that real change was possible. As night fell, Andre looked out over the base one last time before retiring to his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. And he would be ready, just as he had always been, to stand up for what was right and to lead by example. The Valor and Integrity Medal gleamed in the fading light, a reminder of how far he had come and of the important work that still lay ahead. Sergeant Andre Coleman, decorated war hero and champion for equality, was ready to write the next chapter in his remarkable journey. The crisp autumn air carried a hint of change as Sergeant Andre Coleman strode across Fort Bragg's parade grounds. 6 months had passed since the creation of the Valor and Integrity Medal, and the impact of Andre's work on the task force was beginning to ripple through the ranks of the military. As he walked, Andre's hand unconsciously brushed against the metal pin to his chest. It had become more than just a symbol of his personal achievement. It was a constant reminder of the responsibility he carried and the changes he was working to implement. The past months had been a whirlwind of meetings, policy drafts, and often heated debates. Andre had found himself at the forefront of discussions that were reshaping the very fabric of military culture. It hadn't been easy. There had been resistance, skepticism, and at times, outright hostility from those who clung to the old ways. But there had also been victories, moments that made every struggle worthwhile. Andre's mind drifted to a conversation he'd had just last week with a young private, a woman of color who'd approached him after a base-wide seminar on the new initiatives. "Sergeant Coleman," she'd said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I just wanted to thank you. When I joined up, I never thought I'd see someone who looked like me making real changes from the top. You've given us hope." Those words had stayed with Andre, fueling his determination on the days when the challenges seemed insurmountable. As he neared the administration building, Andre spotted a familiar face, Colonel Robert Simmons, the man who had once overlooked him for recognition. The two men's eyes met, and for a moment, Andre felt a flicker of the old resentment. But as Simmons approached, Andre saw something he hadn't expected: humility. "Sergeant Coleman," Simmons said, his voice gruff but sincere. "Got a moment?" Andre nodded, curious about what the colonel had to say. "I owe you an apology," Simmons began, the words seeming to cost him considerable effort. "I was wrong, not just about you, but about a lot of things. Your work these past months, it's opened my eyes to biases I didn't even know I had." Andre felt a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, sir," he replied. "That means a lot." As Simmons walked away, Andre realized that this was what real change looked like, not just in policies and procedures, but in hearts and minds. Entering the building, Andre made his way to the conference room where the task force was set to meet. Secretary Hawkins was already there, engaged in intense discussion with Major Martinez. "Ah, Sergeant Coleman," the secretary greeted him warmly. "Just the man we needed. We've got a situation that requires your unique perspective." Over the next hour, Andre found himself deep in discussion about a proposed overhaul of the military's mentorship program. The goal was to create more opportunities for soldiers from underrepresented backgrounds to connect with senior officers who could guide their careers. "The key," Andre found himself saying, "is to make sure this isn't just seen as a diversity initiative. It needs to be about identifying and nurturing talent, period. When we limit ourselves to a narrow view of what a leader looks like, we miss out on incredible potential." Secretary Hawkins nodded approvingly. "Well said, Sergeant. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need." As the meeting wrapped up, Major Martinez pulled Andre aside. "I've got some news you'll want to hear," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "Remember that young lieutenant who spoke up in our first task force meeting? The one who talked about the everyday struggles?" Andre nodded, recalling the powerful moment. "Well," Martinez continued, "she's just been recommended for an accelerated promotion. Her CO cited her exceptional leadership and innovative thinking, qualities he admitted he might have overlooked before our new initiatives took effect." Andre felt a surge of pride and hope. This was tangible proof that their efforts were making a difference. As he left the building, the afternoon sun warm on his face, Andre's phone buzzed with a message. It was from his sister, Aisha. "Guess what, big bro? I did it. Just got my acceptance to West Point. You blazed the trail, and now I'm following in your footsteps. Mom and Dad are over the moon. Call when you can." Andre felt a lump form in his throat. He thought back to that little girl who had once declared she would write to every newspaper about his heroism. Now she was embarking on her own journey to serve. That evening, as Andre sat in his quarters, he reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The valor and integrity medal gleamed on his dresser, a testament to where this journey had begun. But it was the future that excited him now, a future where every soldier, regardless of their background, would have the opportunity to excel and be recognized for their merits. There was still much work to be done, challenges to be faced, and battles to be fought. But as Andre Coleman prepared for another day of working towards a more equitable and just military, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any he'd ever known. He picked up his phone to call Aisha, eager to congratulate her and share in her excitement. As he dialed, Andre realized that this moment, this progress, this hope for the future, this was what true valor and integrity looked like. And he was proud to be a part of it. The ringing of the phone was answered by Aisha's exuberant voice. "Andre, can you believe it?" Andre smiled, feeling the weight of his responsibility and the lightness of his hope in equal measure. "I can, little sis," he said. "And let me tell you, the future is looking brighter every day." as he began to share with Aisha the latest developments and his hopes for her future in the military. Andre knew that this was just the beginning. The ripple effects of change were spreading, and he was at the heart of a transformation that would impact generations of soldiers to come. The night deepened outside his window, but for Sergeant Andre Coleman, the dawn of a new era in the military was just beginning to break. Andre Coleman's life had changed in ways he never expected, and the ripple effect of that recognition reached far beyond the military, touching the lives of those who heard his story. If you were inspired by Andre's journey, make sure to subscribe for more stories of courage and justice. And before you go, let us know, how would you have reacted if you were in Andre's shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts.